Good afternoon and welcome to this Open Campus Forum. I'm Ken McClure and I'm Vice President for Administrative and Information Services here at Missouri State. And our purpose today is to hear from and ask questions of presidential candidate Cliff Smart. Just a couple of procedural items. Cliff will be asked to make opening comments on questions or issues that he deems important. We will then offer an opportunity for questions. I would ask that you raise your hand and wait for the handheld microphones to be delivered to you. Please stand if you would and identify yourself, the department in which you work or teach, and whether you are a student. Let me also encourage you to complete the online evaluation forms. They are available on the university's homepage and encourage you very strongly to complete those. Cliff is joined today by his wife, Gail. They have two sons, Murray and Jim, one granddaughter, Addie, and Cliff will be introducing himself here in just a moment. We will go until 4:30 or until there are no further questions, whichever comes first. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce presidential candidate, Mr. Cliff Smart.
Thank you for coming today. And thank you for this opportunity to visit with you all about Missouri State University. I'm going to make some opening comments. I've made some notes so that I make sure that I cover the things that I want to cover because this is kind of important to me. And then I'll come out from behind the podium and answer questions for as long as folks have questions, and we'll talk about what's on your mind. I do want to begin by introducing my wife, Gail. Gail, would you stand? She doesn't get that kind of ovation at home, and so I wanted to make sure she had it here. Gail and I met 28 years ago in law school when we were in Fayetteville. We have been married 26 years. She is a lawyer by training as well. She is currently not practicing. She is the chair of the Center City Christian Outreach, which is an organization of 8 downtown churches that operate the Well of Life Food Bank. She's also been active in the Springfield Public Schools Foundation, particularly the Teacher Appreciation Banquet and fundraising there. Is involved in all sorts of social and charitable and church activities in our community. I go into all of that because she is a huge part of me and how we would do this job together. I would not be here applying for the job on a permanent basis if Gail were not all in on us taking this on, and she is. Two subjects that I want to visit with you all about before we do questions. The first is telling a little bit about myself. I suspect most of you know these things or have looked at them on the resume. But for those that haven't, I'll quickly go through that, and then I'll talk a little bit about how we got here today. So let me start with the biography piece. I am 52 years old. My parents were educators. My mom was a high school teacher, taught English, particularly Shakespeare, had a master's degree from the University of Arkansas. My dad was on the faculty at the University of Arkansas for 45 years. He retired just a couple of years ago. He was a tenured professor in architecture, and for about 15 of those years, he was the dean of the architecture school at Fayetteville. I always thought school was important, and as you guys have seen on the resume, I did well at school. I had a great career as a trial lawyer for 21 years, first at the Army, paying back my tuition dollars. That's how I was able to attend Tulane University on an ROTC scholarship. And then finishing up at the Strong Law Firm, which is the firm that Tom Strong founded and for which Strong Hall is named. You may have wondered why, since I'm applying for a university position, did I put those list of cases, of law cases, on my resume? In part, I wanted to convey that I practiced law at really the highest level for 15 years. When you do a case, a product liability case against Ford Motor Company, for example, the last one I tried in rural Tennessee called Potter versus Ford, my partners and I invested over $500,000 of our own money, representing a woman who was paralyzed as a result of a defective product. You know how much is at stake, that if you don't win, not only do you not get her a recovery, but you lose all of your money that you have invested and the time. And that builds character, and that builds leadership ability and management ability. And so I did that and was fortunate to do that with Tom for 15 years. I was a finalist twice under a merit selection process for the Missouri Supreme Court, the first time when I was 42 years old. 4 years ago, after I took the general counsel position here, I was elected by the lawyers in Greene County as one of 2 people to serve on the 31st Judicial Commission. That's the group of 5 people that selects our judges through a merit system. And I'm very proud of that, as it's recognition of both ability and the way I think that I practice law in Springfield by my peers. I joined the university 5 years ago as general counsel, and quickly thereafter was involved in helping the board make significant decisions and being involved in more than legal issues with Dr. Nitzel, and I enjoyed that time very much. Gail and I have lived in Springfield for more than 20 years. As a result of that, we know most of the business and government leaders in our region and many across the state. We've had many in our home over the years for various fundraising and social and charitable events. As you all know, for the past 16 months, I have been acting president of the university, and I would tell you it's been the most rewarding professional time of my life. And so that takes us to, how do we get here? I would say that on June 26th last year, when the board asked me to do this job, I had no intention of ever applying for the permanent position. A good friend of mine, Steve Owens, who's the general counsel for the University of Missouri, had just taken on the presidency. At the press conference that announced him, he had said, I am going to be an interim president only, and I'm going to go back to being a lawyer when all this is done. And I thought that sounded like a pretty good plan, as I was very comfortable in the position of being a lawyer for the university. What changed that is a phone call from Gordon Elliott, who was going to be our board chair. And Gordon said 2 things. Cliff, tomorrow, don't take yourself out of the opportunity to pursue this job full time. And he gave me 2 reasons. And the first reason, he said, I don't know if he was telling the truth or not, but he said, you know, you may be good at this. And you're not going to want to you're not going to want to backtrack from a commitment that you aren't going to seek the position. But probably more importantly, he said, you know, you're going to be doing this job for at least a year and maybe 2. And you're not going to want to set yourself up to be a lame duck immediately. And so leave the door cracked. And Gordon, I appreciate that advice. And so I did. And so when I was asked, would I consider doing this, I said, oh, I'm not thinking about that, but never say never, and questions like that. And so I left the door cracked just a little bit. And what I found over the first year or so of doing this job is that people, at least a lot of people, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people seem to respond well to the kind of leadership style that I brought to the university, which I hope you would describe as open and inclusive and transparent, with a real focus on teamwork and not showmanship, with a real focus on respect and humility. And a part of the way we approach that is that's my style, but a part of the way that we approached the job was because we had some work to do. We had to repair some damaged relationships that had occurred over the year before, with our community, with other leaders of other universities, with the governor's office, with other legislators, with faculty and staff, with our own administrators, many of whom were thinking of leaving or retiring. And probably the thing that I am most proud of having a part in was, I think, changing the morale of the folks that work here. I've had lots of people in the last year and a half come up to me and say, it feels good to work at the university again. And if I had a part in that, it's one of the things that, one of the really good things I think that has come about since we started doing this. We've also been able to accomplish some good things. A year ago, we're down in enrollment. This year, we set a record for enrollment on the Springfield campus. We've been able to set a record for fundraising, both this year going over $20 million for the first time. We finished the Our Promise campaign a year early, and so we raised the goal. You know, one of the things as a part-time plaintiff lawyer over the years, I've asked a lot of people for money in my life, and I have some skill at that. And so we have been successful in fundraising this year. We gave faculty, maybe for the first time ever, real input in the budget process, where they chose whoever they wanted to be a part of that group. And we took that group, and you know what? It was a good group. There were no bad participants in that entire group. And so we worked through a very difficult year where we thought we were going to lose $12 million from our budget to reallocate money such that we could give the first raise the university has given in 3 years. And we're poised to give a second raise when the board meets in a week and a half in October. We have begun new programs. The behavioral health program will start in January, which is a great way for kids that went to community college or have been working in the health field to finish up and graduate. The criminology program is now completely online undergraduate. We have an MBA program that is online now completely. We have a general business program that can be taken at nights on Tuesday and Thursday and done in 2 years. We have expanded our online and blended and evening classes. We have made unprecedented strides in diversity as we created the Division of Diversity Inclusion after it kind of languished and hung out there for several years, and have funded that and have grown in our diversity. We have operated in what I believe to be the most open manner in memory, and we are in the process of better defining our public affairs mission. But you know, that's what we've worked on in the last year and a half. The real question for folks is, what's the vision for the future? And while I believe that the best predictor of the future is success in the past, you need to know that I believe there is so much more than we can do, and that I look forward to being a part of that as we grow together. Sometimes I talk about it as growing into our name, really becoming Missouri State University, and growing our programs and our reputation and our reach beyond the state of Missouri and into the Midwest and the Mid-South, putting together signature programs that kids from all over our country and the world will want to come here to take. To wrap this piece of it up, what I would tell you is, I don't want to be president of a university. That's never been my goal. I want to be president of Missouri State University, because this is the university that I care about. I'm not looking to move up. I'm looking to be here as long as you all and the board want me to be here. I think we need a president to build on the relationships that we've reestablished in the last year and a half, and who has a vision to take this university from good to great. And that can't be done in 3 years or even 5 years, and maybe not 10 years. It's someone who is committed to being here for the rest of his career. That's what we need, not someone who's looking to move up if a better job comes along. You know, we have a great mission. We're a comprehensive metropolitan university with a public affairs mission whose goal is to develop educated persons. We don't need to change that mission. We don't need to redefine ourselves. We just need to think bigger and bolder on each piece of that, whether that's in creating destination programs, growing our reputation, expanding our alumni reach, being involved in entrepreneurial and economic development activities in our region, better defining our public affairs mission, better marketing what we do, telling our story better, working on sustainability initiatives, and growing. And the reason we want to grow is so that we fulfill the mission of educating more people. That's what we do, and that should always be our focus. So thanks for putting up with that little speech, and let me now stop. I'm fighting a cold. This is my sixth deal today, and so my voice is starting to fade a little bit. But let me come out, and I'm happy to take questions, and I look forward, Kishore, to your questions every time.
Hear me?
There you go.
Okay. Cliff, you have traveled to China, Afghanistan, South America, and Europe. What have you learned from your travels about other people outside America? Also, once you said that you work 80 hours a week or more every week, you work 80 hours a week. Do you expect all of your senior vice presidents and deans and department heads also to work 80 hours a week?
Let me answer that part of it first so that everybody doesn't immediately leave the building. No. And you know, when I told you that at one time at another session like this, when you asked a question, you know, it's not so that people think, oh, wow, you're putting in a lot of hours. You know, this is a lifestyle job. And as we've talked about at some of the earlier sessions, more and more of the job as we go on will be external. It will be being in Jeff City to advocate for us. It will be being at alumni events and meeting with donors. And it will be attending things that our students and faculty are doing. You know, we had a great lecture last night from Warren St. John. It's not work to come to that lecture. And so the great bulk of what we do is enjoyable. And if you don't like that part, if you don't like interacting with alumni and people that love the university and going to sporting events and lectures, etc., then it's not the job for you. But Gail and I like that. And so no one should feel sorry for me that if in any given week we work 80 hours or if we're on a plane for 6 hours going somewhere, that's all good. All right, let's go to the first question. I think it was, what have I learned from being overseas? And I don't know that I necessarily learned all this from the travels, but sometimes you travel and then you read about the travel and you think about your travel and you sort of process things and come to some conclusions. And if you give me that latitude, what I would say is that you learn that people are essentially the same wherever you go. That when you go to China, there are people living there that care about their country, that care about their family, that want to provide a good lives or a better lives for their kids, that think about spiritual issues, that want to make a difference in the places that they live. And to steal a line from Warren St. John last night, for people that power through the difficulty that it is to interact with people that are different than you are, whether it's race, religion, ethnicity, how much money you have, or whatever it is, the reward is almost always good. And you make friends and learn things that you thought you never could. And we have probably 7 or 8 good friends that we met here when they were students in the EMBA program. They're physicians and businessmen and women in China. It was fabulous to see them. And if you don't get out of your comfort zone and say, you know what, I'm going to be an international friend. I'm going to for a year be friends with these 4 Chinese young women who are living in an apartment that don't know anybody in America. You know, and it's not to try to make a difference in their lives. You want them to feel good and welcome in Springfield, but it ends up making a difference in your life. And that's a piece of what I think public affairs is.
Finally, the Supreme Court of the
there's
United
more.
States this week is considering whether the usage of racial preferences in school admissions at this point in time is constitutional or not. With your background in law, in your opinion, is it constitutional at this point in time? Or is it needed at this point in time?
Right now, before they issue this opinion on this case, it is constitutional to factor in diversity in admissions decisions. We do not do that at Missouri State. Every student that is admitted into Missouri State comes through the same gate, meets the same standard. And so I think that's important so that our minority students should be looked at exactly the same way as our international students, as any white student from Monette or Springfield or St. Louis or anywhere else. Everybody comes in here under the same standards through the same gate and has the same ability to compete. We have been able to grow our historically underrepresented student groups without making exceptions through our admission progress. This year we were up 225 students. We're over 2,000 students for historically underrepresented groups for the first time in our history. We're working on with partnerships with College Bound, for example, to significantly grow that. And so we can compete for and recruit students of all backgrounds, of all races, of all ethnicities, without creating a special class for them. I believe in that.
Thank you.
Pauline?
Yes. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Spott, for being with us this afternoon. Thank you in a special way for the calm and, I suppose, security and confidence you've brought to us and the ethos you have created here over the past whatever number of months. It can't be what you said, but it seems like 2 or 3 months ago. But I must admit first, before I get to my question, that I've just come back from a day and a half in Jeff City. And my entrance in Jeff City, of course, is Missouri Faculty Senate Associations. So I did my own background checking just to be sure that the good name of Missouri State and behavior at Kofi and other such matters have been very favorably impacted by your presence. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
And my question really is, as you look to the future, what do you envision as the most challenging situation that will face you should you be the permanent president, say within the next year or so? Thank you.
You know, there are a variety of things on the horizon, but let me focus on, since you talked about Jeff City, Pauline, let's start there. There are going to be significant challenges in Jeff City, and we must have strong advocates up there to be in that game as decisions are made. For example, there is going to be a real push this year for tax credit reform. And you may think, well, how does that impact me? Well, even modest tax credit reform would put $250 million, at least in the next year or so, back into general revenue, which can go to K through 12, prisons, higher ed, poverty programs, etc. It increases the revenue. And since we live in a state where new taxes are virtually impossible, that's one of the potential sources of revenue. We will be involved in that fight with our chamber here, with the chamber in St. Louis and Kansas City, with universities from around the state, with our lobbying organization. That's a very important fight. We have to be involved in that. We've already started talking to our delegation about that. That's a little bit of change of how we've operated here. We've in the past often stayed very focused within our own just lobbying for Missouri State. I think we've got to do more than that. Right now, there is a Kofi meeting going on. Unfortunately, I could not attend, and so Paul Kincaid is representing us at that meeting. They are working on a formula of how to divide up money. Presumably new money that comes to higher ed. What piece is going to be based on enrollment growth? What piece is going to be based on performance funding? What piece is going to be based on the complexity of the kind of classes that we offer. It is critical that as a group, the four-year schools come to an agreement on how new money should be divided up. The community colleges do it and have done it for a long time, and it gives them an advantage. We need to have such a formula. I personally have been involved in those discussions. On Monday evening, I took Monday off because somebody else had the stage, I think, that day, and I didn't want to be in his way. But on Monday evening at 5 o'clock, Tim Wolf, who's the president of the MU system, and I were on the phone for close to an hour strategizing in terms of how our two systems, which are the biggest players in this, can advocate for similar positions and because typically our interests are the same. We've both grown in numbers, we both have significant graduate programs, and we're both supporters of performance funding because we do well under that kind of system, because we have a good university. And so we're working to put that together. Another part of the Jeff City piece will be getting our legislators to understand how we are funded and that we are at the bottom. I don't think they had an appreciation of that. And so we had a meeting with, we had two meetings, one with about 25 Republican state representative candidates that are running for office in southern Missouri, one with the 4 or 5 Democratic candidates that have some realistic chance of winning in an election in southern Missouri. And we went through and we outlined how we are funded next to last. And we talked about the importance of being willing to put a stake in the ground if there is equity money available, that we have to participate. And so our folks on the Appropriations Committee and the Budget Committee and our state senators have to be willing to say, we're not letting this legislation move until we're a part of it. We've talked to them about our desire. Another way to get money is through specific programs. We've talked about a desire to get money through an occupational therapy program startup that we want to do. The University of Missouri wants to start sort of a med school campus in Springfield. Well, you know, the great bulk of that money will go to Columbia because that's where the faculty will be housed and that's where the building will be, and a very small piece of that will be down here. What we've talked to our folks about is, if that's going to happen, and we're generally supportive of that because we need more physicians in Missouri, then a piece of that money has to come to us for health care programs that we want to start and that West Plains wants to start or that we want to grow. And so this is going to be a year where relationships with the other university presidents is critical, where relationships with our state senators is critical, where relationships with the governor's office is critical. And I'll tell one more story. I'm going to fall into the habit of talking too long to answer questions. One of the other things that came out of a COFI meeting this summer, I'll give you a little history. I'd attended 5 or 6 of these, and frankly, they were not very productive. And I was thinking I'm just wasting a day going to these meetings, and I started thinking about who else could go instead of me. And Tim Wolf attended his first meeting, and we talked afterwards, and he had exactly the same experience. Why am I doing this? And so what we decided to do, and this was my initiative when he was down in Springfield meeting folks, we met at the Starbucks for an hour, and we talked about how can we make COFI more meaningful. And we decided we needed a meeting with me, with him, 2 other presidents that are leaders in the organization, Mike Nitzel and David Russell. And we sat down at dinner a couple of weeks later in Columbia at one of the country clubs up there, and we strategized how can we get all of our universities together for one thing? Let's accomplish one thing. And we ended up with another presidents-only meeting, now including everyone. And ultimately what we concluded was, let's settle on STEM. Everybody has some kind of STEM research or program, whether it's teacher education in science or whether it's biology or chemistry or engineering or whatever it is. Let's see if there is an additional pot of money that we could all go after. We put a plan together. Our organization met with Dr. Nitzel, And the governor's office is now working on such a plan of additional money. That happens because of the relationship Tim Wolf and I have and the willingness to work together with other organizations for the good of all of us. There are dozens of other similar kinds of issues, but a big job of our next president is going to be leading our team in Jeff City, aggressively advocating for additional funding, and I think there are ways we can do it. I'll try to give shorter answers. Kent. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brittany.
My name is Brittany, and I'm a sophomore here. The university had a difficult time under our previous president, and when you were named as our interim president, you were asked by the board not to be a caretaker of our university. And oftentimes the individual that serves in that interim role is succeeded by someone else in order to take the university in a different direction. However, after your having been a very successful interim president, why are you the person to take Missouri State to the next step?
Good. Brittany, thank you for that question. And you're right. Sometimes a leader of an organization that can stabilize and get people feeling good about themselves is not necessarily the person that also has the vision to go to the next level. And that was kind of how the other candidate pitched it, that I'm the status quo guy, the Springfield guy, and he's the bigger vision guy. I would take issue with that. I would give him credit for having a real vision for the university based on what his limited knowledge of it to this point, but I give him credit for that. But I think that we have demonstrated that we have that vision too. And that we actually know our team, and I like to say we because it's not just me, that we have put together specifics of how we do that. You know, it starts with signature programs. We have some great programs and great faculty here, but there are ways that we could take our best programs and grow them in terms of reputation. And biology is an example. Several weeks ago, Frank and I met with Tammy Yockey and Alicia Mathis and Janice Green, and we talked about how we can make the biology department even better. It just added 70 students. So initially we said we need new lab space. And so one of the new classrooms going into Plaster will be converted into a biology lab. They said, you know, we've got this great field station at Bull Shoals, which I've seen and which is fabulous, but it's lacking a residence hall. It's lacking a dorm where people can be down there in the summer and take classes. It's about $1 million project. How do we get there? Well, we talked about that. There's the potential for a grant to get us halfway there. And so then we talked about how the rest of us could fund that. There's a potential donor involved who has an interest in museum science. And so we talked about how we could work on a minor in museum science that could be a part of that. And we challenged, you know, is there a way even in biology that we could put together some kind of program that non-traditional students can be involved in. And Frank talked about developing further a professional master's program that's there. And so even though biology is in many ways already a signature program, there are ways that it can grow and expand and develop in reputation so that kids from all over the Midwest and the Mid-South will want to come to Missouri State University to do undergraduate research at the Bull Shoals Field Station and study biology here. And I can give that same example for about a dozen departments. And so a piece of this is figuring out where our signature programs ought to be. There's some in every college. Our College of Health and Human Services is up 200 students. We turn out the best accountants anywhere in Missouri. BKD wants to hire them all. We have an incredible theater department that's done tent theater for 50 years and has an incredible group of alumni. 300 or so were here this summer to celebrate the 50th anniversary of that. And I could go on and on and on. You know, our HRA department is poised to just blow the roof off, except they have cruddy space. They're in the middle of the professional building, and we need to get them out of there so that the healthcare folks can take that over and they have their own space so they can become a signature program. And if we do that, then a rising tide is going to float all boats. We'll have better students across the board coming from more places, and we'll be able to get additional research opportunities, and we'll be able to hire better faculty. Not that there's anything wrong with our current faculty. And so there are ways for us to really get to the next level, but I think it starts with programs. You know, we can talk about enrollment growth, we can talk about how we better define public affairs. There's a lot of pieces of this, but I think it really begins with creating signature programs that students from all over the world want to study here.
Hi, Cliff.
Hey, Brent.
My name is Brent Shields. I'm an MBA student here at Missouri State. My question, you mentioned this, 7 years ago, Missouri State had probably one of the most significant changes for our university, and that's when we acquired the Missouri State name from being SMS.
I agree.
And you mentioned in your intro about growing into our name. What are some of your ideas and thoughts on how we can truly become Missouri State University and kind of continue to shed our old SMS identity?
Yeah, a part of it, I won't repeat what I just said, but I think it starts with growing signature programs. I think that's a piece of it. But I also think that there are, you know, a dozen other pieces of it. A part of it is truly developing an alumni outreach program, both in person and electronically, that reaches out to the 100,000 graduates that we have living all around the world. We've done good things in development. But I've gotten, you know, being an incumbent's a little bit of an advantage. I've gotten to see a preview of the marketing study we have underway right now. And one of the answers from all of our alumni groups is we want more interaction with you. We want more events. We want to be able to hook up with our friends through social media. We want to know what's going on at the university. We want to interact with our students. And so a piece of this is developing our alumni outreach to the level of other significant universities. A piece of it is enrollment growth. If you look at the 13 public universities in Missouri this year, 8 of them grew, 5 of them shrunk. We want to be in the group of 8. You can go look up and see who they are. We want to be in that group. We don't want to be in the group that's shrinking. There's a perception that things are happening and you're growing and you're doing good things. A piece of it is partnerships and entrepreneurial economic development kinds of activities. We want to grow, you know, as a metropolitan university in the arts. We want to partner with our K-12 partners around the state to work on teacher ed, because that's one of the things that we're known for. We want to grow internationally. You know, I'll admit to watching the video of the last one of these online, which is also an advantage of going second. And I heard comments that we have too many of our eggs in one basket internationally in terms of China. Here's the truth of that. Kent Thomas leaves next week to go to 6 Eastern European countries because we're working to develop and further develop relationships there for exchange opportunities and students to come here. Dave Minard, Assistant Dean of College of Business, and Steve Robinette have been in South America for the last week. I got a report from Dr. Baker today that we expect literally dozens of new students from those countries here next week. We've been to Vietnam, not we. I have not been to Vietnam, nor do I plan to go to Vietnam. But Jim Baker has been to Vietnam twice in the last year. We want to start a dual credit program in Vietnam. Why? Well, we'll get some students and some money from that. But the real reason is to see if those students then will come here to the United States and to Missouri State University to study. And so we have been working to expand our base, well, for at least 16 months, if not before that, and we're making great strides in that. So, you know, a piece of growing into our name is attracting students from around the world to our programs, attracting students from you know, all the way from Chicago down to New Orleans and throughout the Midwest. A piece of it is upping our game in athletics. A piece of it is upping the diversity of our students and faculty and staff, which is still below the averages in our state. A piece of it is so that every student in Missouri, whether they're 18 years old or about to graduate from community college, is thinking about whether they should come here, that they know us, that we're not the default, oh crud, I didn't get into Mizzou, I better think about coming to Missouri State. And there are, whether it's marketing, whether it's the quality of our programs, whether it's the way we interact, how we recruit, our presence. You know, one of the things Brent and I have talked about is having signature events in Kansas City, in St. Louis, in Northwest Arkansas, to really draw in alums, being involved in the business communities in these areas. We want to be the state school of Missouri and beyond. Right now, 85% of our students come from Missouri. Only 65% of the students at the University of Missouri come from Missouri. So we have students from every county in Missouri. And yet there's still people that don't know of us, and we can do better on all sorts of different levels. All of that is a part of growing into our name, but I go back to what we talked about a minute ago. It starts with programs, quality programs that students like you and Brittany and Paige want to be here to be in and to take. Yes, sir. Okay.
I'll start over.
Start over, Evan.
Awesome. Well, my name's Evan Clark. I'm the president of Students for a Sustainable Future. And since last semester, we've been running our Beyond Coal campaign, which is asking the university to move towards clean renewable energy instead of coal energy. And I could talk to you about all the reasons all day for that, but save that for another time. But since then, we've had over 1,000 students, faculty, and community members sign our petition asking for this. And throughout the country, there's tons of campuses that are committing towards this, and even our own state, Mizzou and WashU, have similar Beyond Coal campaigns and are having conversations with their board of governors or regents and all these different things. So how do you feel about our proposal, and how would you possibly move this conversation forward in the future?
I think it is a conversation worth having. But there are parts of that conversation are going to be talking about some of the realities based on where we live. It's my understanding that 80% of our electricity comes from burning coal in Missouri. It is not possible right now for us only to have wind or other kind of power. It is frequently not available. When it is available, it costs 27% more. And so if you've got a $10 million utility bill, then you're adding $2.7 million to your cost, even if it is available to pump in wind power from somewhere else. And so part of the conversation, Evan, has to be, who am I going to take $2.7 million away from to be able to fund this? How's that going to impact programs that students want to take? How's that going to impact our ability to raise salaries? Now, having said all that, and that was a hypothetical number may end up being different than that, but having said all that, we are making progress on all fronts in terms of energy efficiency and sustainability issues. We brought the rec center online this year without adding to the amount of electricity we burn. And that's because we extended the chilled water loop. And so we became more efficient, even though we added a 100,000 square foot building to our needs. 10 years ago, we were the #1 user of electricity in Southwest Missouri. I think we're now #5. Is that right, Ken? And our use has actually gone down, even though we've added multiple buildings to the grid. We have participated just in the last 16 months in I think at least 4 or 5 projects where we spent $1 million or so to install energy efficient devices which over time, 4, 5, 6 years, will pay for themselves. And Bob Eccles has been a part of that and can talk to you about that. We have changed the kind of lighting we have in the parking lot so that they're more efficient. We have conserved water all summer as we entered drought conditions, as we shut down our fountains. Every shower head in our residence hall is a water-saving device. We eliminated trays in our our dining facilities, and the result is there's much less food waste that is thrown away. This year, in the fall, we will begin recycling at JQH Arena. So all the plastic cups and bottles can go in recycle bins and will be reused. I hope everybody will take advantage of that and not throw their cups in the trash can. And so I'm on board with the concept. We might argue a little bit about the details and the timeline at which we get there, but we are on board with the concept. The last 2 big buildings we built, the Foster Rec Center and the DAR Center, are LEED certified. What level, Ken? Silver. That costs extra money, and we invested that extra money to do that. So we are doing good things on sustainability. Can we be coal-free in 10 years? Probably not. Could we be in 20 or 25? Well, it may depend on how the whole state of Missouri deals with that issue. University of Missouri at Rolla spent $36 million to put in a power plant. You know, you got to make decisions when money is scarce, as is what's the best use of those funds. I don't know if I answered your question exactly, but I hope I at least dealt with the topic. Kent.
Hi, I'm Kent Reagan, Department Head of Finance and General Business. Those are great questions from our students, and I'd hate to deny even one more student an opportunity to ask a question. Great job. In the Administrator Return to Faculty policy that was adopted this year, for people who do not have an academic background, severance may be more appropriate than tenure. In your case, which is appropriate, and regardless of which side you believe is appropriate in your case, what are your thoughts on tenure?
Okay. In terms specifically, if the board were to decide that I'm the best person to look into the future and carry us forward, I would insist upon a contract that had a severance clause with no tenure. I have no business being tenured in any college at this university. That's not what I am. I think I bring the leadership skill set that we need to be president, but I don't have an academic background, and I should not be a teacher. I hope that I'm doing this job in 10, 12, or 15 years, and that everybody is still on board with the kind of leadership style I bring. But whether it's 3 years or 5 years or 10 years or whenever the board decides that they've had enough of me, the contract should have a provision that allows them to change presidents with a severance clause. In terms of the overall view of is tenure a good thing or not, I think tenure is a very good thing. I grew up with a dad who was a tenured professor at the University of Arkansas. I think tenure brings the stability that faculty need to be able to express controversial views, to advocate for things that are unpopular, no matter what the administration or the board or the president thinks. And I am completely supportive of that. Reed?
Cliff, I have a couple of questions here, and I'll ask them, I guess, in order and let you answer first. So the first question, you know, because you met back when you were university counsel and we were under the previous president, President Kofer, you met with the faculty senate committee that I was a member of that was looking into unionization.
Okay.
And as a result of that ad hoc committee, we formed a union on campus that I'm the president of that's affiliated with the NEA.
Okay.
And so our discussion there, primarily with President Kofer, but partially with you as well, was about the future of collective bargaining on campus. And I guess I'd like to know if your viewpoint of that is different, or maybe I should say what exactly it is, since you were really speaking there as an advocate for President Kofer. So I'd like input on you about that. And you know, this is not just coming from me, also from the other members of our local.
And I'll be honest with you, I don't really remember that conversation other than it occurred. So if I take it, what's my viewpoint on collective bargaining? We bargain now with two unions, the IBEW and the Teamsters, who represent groups of staff employees at Missouri State University. Typically our team is led by Ken McClure with our HR director, Ed Choate. We have been able every year to negotiate contracts, collective bargaining agreements with each of those unions that both we and they found acceptable. And I think we believe essentially that it's been a fair process and don't have any complaints over it. I don't know that, you know, I would hope, and maybe, you know, as I have always said, I'm a half full guy, not a glass half full guy, not a glass half empty guy. I would hope that for the great bulk of our employees, that we could work together for the benefit of all without the need to have unions representing every group of folks. I think we've demonstrated that through how we've handled budgetary issues through the Executive Budget Committee and the other budget committees that exist. I think our faculty handbook and staff handbook provide multiple layers of protections and rights for our employees, and that people are given due process before any decision is made now. If there were significant changes that folks would advocate for, I've always been open to those. And so I would hope we could do that outside the process of collective bargaining. But our history has been that if that's the process folks choose, we bargain in good faith, and we've been able to reach contracts.
Thank you. And my second question actually has to do with academics and is related to this idea of, you know, how do we grow into this idea of Missouri State University? And so what I noticed about your answer there was that you did not talk really about the issue of academics as it relates especially to research. And so I don't know how much you're aware of the background, but this idea, if you think about the difference between us and other universities in the state, for example, my son graduated with a PhD 3 years ago from Washington University in St. Louis through a department in the medical school. When I went to his graduation, I sat there and looked in the rotunda of the building where his department offices were, and looked at the 23 men who had won Nobel Prizes in medicine from Washington University as faculty members. And I guess to me, and I think to most faculty, that's an important part of growing into Missouri State University. And I guess I'd like to know what your opinion is. And I guess I found it a concern because you didn't mention it before. Is that important to you if you become the president?
I think research is an important part of a university like ours. However, it's not realistic to think that we're going to do the level of research that occurs at WashU or the University of Missouri. We do not have PhD programs. In fact, we're prohibited from having PhD programs currently. That's not to say that research isn't important. It is important. You know, I got a question earlier in the day about faculty workload. And Frank and I have talked about this, and we're both supportive of the idea that professors who are good at and love research should get to focus more of their time on that and less on being in the classroom. And vice versa, faculty that get to a point in their careers where they want to do no research at all should focus more of their time on teaching classes rather than research. And our deans have the ability to adjust workloads to meet those different goals. And so I don't know if you're looking for something more than that, but obviously continuing to do research and also having grant opportunities and all of that is a piece of this. And you know, there are probably 24 pieces of this, and I apologize for leaving that one out. Carol? Oh, I'm sorry, up at the top.
Hi, Cliff. I'm Austria-Reynes from the Department of Religious Studies.
Yes.
I wanted to ask, what is your vision for the future, the role, the place of the humanities at an institution like this where the focus of the students is on professional training? So where do you see that going in? And then maybe to piggyback on what Reed Olson said about research, there used to be, when I came to this university in 2004, as support for research, there was a $1,000 travel grant that one could apply for international travel, and when 2008 came along and the budget crashed, then that was scratched, and now there's no support for international presentations for faculty members. Would there be a way to bring that back?
Let me start with I mean, the last question is sure, there's a way to bring that back, but there are choices. I mean, we live in a world where there's limited resources, and the more we fund that kind of program, then the less we have to fund something else. And I'm sure that's something the provost would certainly be willing to interact with you about, and I think there's value in international travel and attending conferences and presenting papers, and I don't think we'd have any disagreement with that at all. What's the value of the humanities? Yes, lots of our students today, as you know, want to learn a trade or want to go into a profession. They want to be accountants or nurses or audiologists or etc. I am a huge proponent that the arts and the humanities is valuable. I think, and in fact my younger son is at Hamilton College in upstate New York, which is a small liberal arts school. Why are we willing to pay for that? I don't know sometimes. Because he didn't get any scholarships at all. I think because we think that kind of education has value. You learn to think and write and speak and solve problems. And if you have those skills, you can do almost anything. I didn't go to school to be a university president. I went to Tulane University and studied history and English and political science, and then figured I needed to learn a trade and became a lawyer and had a good career in that. But the skills you learn all along the way, the skills that made me a good lawyer and a good team leader make you a good CEO. And the subject matter is less important than the skill set. And so I think more and more, yes, young people are going to be learning professions and trades, and that's a piece of what they're going to do. But more and more young people are going to have to form their own way. They're going to have to be entrepreneurs. They're going to have to create their own job, because Ford Motor Company isn't hiring tens of thousands of people anymore. And I think the best way, one of the best ways to learn how to do that is to get a solid liberal arts education. And that's more than me just talking, because an example of how we value that is the Foreign Language Institute that will start this fall in collaboration with 5 other universities. One, that's valuable in and of itself. We say we want to live in a global world. Well, we got to speak more than just English. The kids that are younger than me got to speak a different language. They can't just speak English. If they want to be in international business, if they want to travel the world, if they want to make a difference in what they're doing. And so, it will be good for our students because we'll be able to teach classes in languages we otherwise don't have enough to make a class. It will be good for the students going to SBU or Evangel that don't have any opportunity to learn language except for Spanish. Now they can study Chinese or Arabic or Italian or Portuguese. And we'll make money off of that, and we'll advance the cause of language education in our community. And so maybe I'm a little old-fashioned on this, but I'm still a believer that a liberal arts education is valuable. One more question. Carol, wrap us up.
Carol Miller, I teach business law. I'd like to piggyback on your comments about where your son is going to school and the importance of writing, critical thinking, and all of those things can be accomplished better with small classes. At least in the College of Business and some other disciplines, a small class is a luxury now. And when you have 60 to 160 students in a classroom, you cannot have a lot of writing assignments with the professor giving feedback when you don't have grad assistants in your discipline. And do you see, in conjunction with the desire to grow the enrollment, any realistic chance of hiring enough faculty members that we can get the class size back to a more manageable level where we can instill and input more individualized interaction with the students and more opportunities for writing assignments and other critical thinking assignments which are somewhat diminished with the larger class size?
Our student-teacher ratio is 19-to-1. That's up a little bit over the last several years, but it is still a reasonable number. There's not a scenario where every class can have no more than 20 students in it. That's not the world we live in anymore. That's a world you live in if you pay $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 to go to school. That's not our world. We've lost 13.5% of our budget from the state in the last 4 years. And so we're going to have to figure out how we have those classes of 15 or 18 or 20 so that the kind of interaction you've talked about occurs. But it may mean we also have some classes of 150 or 200. And that's not the answer you want to hear, but that's the world we live in unless Missouri changes from a low-tax, low-service state that we currently are. We fund education number 46 in the nation. Every state in the old Confederacy, including my home state of Arkansas, funds education better than we do. And that's why, to go back to Pauline's question, that's why we got to be in Jeff City fighting for tax credit returns. That's why I hope we're all supporting the tobacco tax initiative. And Steve, don't print that. Where's Steve? Don't print that. Unless things change, we live in a circumstances where we have to make decisions based on the money that we have. And so I can't promise you we can go back completely to the scenario you're talking about.